All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, for this, our virtual MemX work-life balance in a pandemic. We're absolutely delighted to welcome you to this session and we hope you enjoy. So by way of introduction, my name is Kate Miller. I work within the membership team here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, and my role is a member delivery coordinator. Throughout the session, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. I'm on the chat there. Fantastic. So before we start, just a few quick items of housekeeping. We ask that throughout the session, you keep your microphones on mute. Throughout the session, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them through using the chat box, and we will have that question and answer session at the end. And you will also receive the slides and the recording after the session. So keep an eye out for those in your inbox. Additionally, if you'd like to keep your video on throughout the session, we certainly welcome you to do so. It's lovely to see your faces. There's no obligation to do so, but we'd love to see it. Alrighty. So it's my absolute pleasure today to introduce Susan Rochester-Fimmel from Balance at Work Proprietary Limited. Susan co-founded Balance at Work in July 2006 with a plan to find and share practical ways to improve our working lives. Susan has decades of experience working in HR, consulting, and coaching across various industries. Her tendency to balance analytical thinking with an optimistic outlook makes it natural for her to solve problems and provide direction. This makes her an effective facilitator, strategic advocate, and coach who consistently creates new and more effective ways of doing things because she's motivated by a desire to help others. And we're so delighted to welcome Susan to deliver this presentation today.
Thanks everyone, and welcome to this session. Now, work-life balance in a pandemic, things have changed a lot because of COVID, haven't they? And I think how we think about work-life balance is just one of those things that's changed. And that's what we're going to talk about today, obviously. So the key points I'll be covering off on today is we'll have a bit of a chat about what we mean by balance. What's new about the ways that we work. We'll take a look at some of the latest research and look at what that means for you in terms of how you work. And then finally, we want to spend some time looking at how do you reclaim balance for yourself mainly, but also for your teams. So let's dive in with the big question. So what is balance? What does that mean to you? How do you feel about balance? Feel free to unmute yourself and throw in your comments or add to the chat box, whatever you prefer. I'm curious to know what balance means to you. Boundaries. Oh, great one. Thank you, Iliada. A safe space, great. If you're in balance, how are you feeling? Feeling sufficient in both worlds, and isn't that a tricky one? Any more comments? So that separation of work and play, so to speak. Oh, and recognising an imbalance and appreciating a proper balance. Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Ashley. Having time for things you love. Oh, these are all such great answers and a lot of coherence with what we're going to discuss today. And thanks, Phil. Yes, respecting different roles in your life and carefully looking after those. For me, balance has a bit of an edge, if you like, in that with a business called Balance at Work, I've spent a lot of time people asking me, oh, do you talk about work-life balance? Is that what your company is about? And initially that wasn't the case. We're more about balancing basically the needs of different people in the workplace, so culture and things like that. However, I've been caused to have a rethink because I had always thought, well, work's part of life and to have balance you know, it's good to enjoy your work. And that's where I came from with work-life balance. I actually quite was resistant to the whole idea of work and life being separate things and being in balance. But like everything else, COVID has changed my view on that. So that's where the whole title about rethinking balance has come from, and what we'd like to do today. So before we look at the changes, let's look at what's happened to balance pre-COVID. I don't know about you, but many of us have worked in cultures that actually overvalue overwork. So this has an influence on balance, doesn't it? We know that in Australia, there are a lot of people who work unpaid overtime, while at the same time we've got underemployed and unemployed people. And I'd like to say that philosophically, we're lucky to be able to have a discussion about work-life balance, because particularly, you know, since the pandemic, there's a lot of people who, for what, you know, one half of that isn't a thing, work. Then I'd like you to also consider the difference. The little person. I'd like us to also consider the difference between resilience and sustainability. I hear a lot of talk at the moment about resilience, resilient training, well-being, and I know that for some people, what's happening is well-being is looking like just something else they're expected to do. I was hearing recently about, you know, an organisation where they're introducing a wellbeing program. They have to complete, everyone has to complete a, you know, 10-page survey beforehand. And if you're already overworked, then that's actually adding more burden and pushing you further out of balance. So I would like us to have more of a focus on what is actually sustainable in the workplace. And for any of you who are working in HR and keen to introduce a wellbeing program, I'd suggest for that to be successful, you'll also need to look at workloads. And you know, it's not just about making people tougher so they can take on more work. And I say that coming from an HR background myself too. Another influence is that in the Western world, we look at things in a linear way. We go, well, this happens, then that, and I'm heading towards a goal. And that can also affect our balance. Whereas under Eastern philosophies, they look at time in more of a circular way. And one of the most comforting things I've heard about the pandemic is when I was listening to a doctor who was from India or Sri Lanka, who was saying the wheel will turn again. And that's, you know, a totally different philosophy, but that's a different way of looking at balance. We live in a world where we expect things now and we expect them to be just perfect, you know, or we'll send it back. Online shopping's a great experience of that. Some of us have been doing more than others during this process, but that drive for instant and perfect can also put balance to one side. How many, well, we don't go to that many networking functions these days, I suppose, face to face in some states. I'm in Sydney, I probably should have said that. But you know, for years now, you meet someone, oh, how are things? Busy, everyone's busy. And that's taken as a status symbol. So there's a little bit of, we're a bit out of whack as far as the values go there. And that's also driven by a need to achieve. And the need to achieve can sometimes be a need to escape something as well. So I think we need to be wary of that. So these things were all happening pre-COVID, you know, 2019, it would have been the same list. But then COVID came along. And so a lot of other influences have changed. Now, this data is saying that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home by, you know, this time in 2021. But I would suspect this research was done late last year, so I'd suspect that that's different now. So when we're working from home, we've got a whole range of other things happening, haven't we? Just some more data on that from Australia. So this was during the lockdowns we had last year in 2020. And you can see what an influence COVID has had on that whole work from home revolution, or whatever we want to call it. It's suddenly organisations that in the past said we can't have people not in the office are finding it that's the way that they had to operate and basically forced into it. So my point here is work from home is here to stay for a lot of us. Of course, there's a certain proportion of the workforce. I think I saw stats the other day that said about 50% of the workforce can't work from home, but a lot of us can. So there are a lot of opportunities that come along with these pandemic changes. It's, you know, it's not all negative working from home. So for many people, that's a great option to be able to have that, to not have the long commute, to not waste time traveling. We're seeing alternative business models that are emerging due to the pandemic because people are looking at different ways of working. So that might be working together in a co-op with other people who do similar work rather than in a corporate. You could also be working anywhere for anyone in any time. And if you're attracted to that, then that, you know, it's obviously a great opportunity. We're seeing that employers are now providing increasing support for mental health and well-being. So that's a positive for better balance. And organisations, I believe, are looking at ways that they can be able to withstand the future shock. So it will be a thing here in Australia, what they're calling the Great Resignation, where people, I saw a figure the other day, 40 to 50% of professionals will, you know, saying, well, if I can work anywhere, I don't need to work, especially if there's an organisation who's saying that they're now demanding me to come back into the office full time, or other things that they're not comfortable with. So there's a lot of things that organisations are doing to ensure that they're protected against future shocks. So all that all that change, and I'm sure a lot of that you've already thought about, is going to have an impact on balance. But let's have a look at some of the mental health aspects that have happened. This is actually pre-pandemic, but the ACTU surveyed people about stresses in the workplace. And these were the stresses that came up with the percentage of people surveyed who said that they had experienced these stresses. So remember, this is pre-COVID. I think most of those stresses would still be current, you know, whether you're working in an office or whether you're working at home. So these are the mental stresses related to work pre-COVID, and now we can add a whole lot of others onto it. So research by McKinsey and Gartner last year looked at remote work, as we've been speaking about, digital acceleration. So, yeah, we're doing this on Zoom. You can't actually function in the workplace now without being able to use Zoom or Teams, or in a professional services type workplace where you would normally be working in an office anyway. But in lots of other aspects of life as well, things are done remotely. You need to log in to do stuff. There's a whole lot of acceleration that's happened that has been brought on by COVID. And that brings its own stresses. There's new roles. Whoever had thought of the role of a COVID marshal? That's just a very simple one. I've been talking to quite a few HR directors recently, And in New South Wales, at least, and particularly in small businesses too, as we're easing out of restrictions, the public health orders are leaving it up to businesses to do a whole heap of stuff. And it's almost like you need someone in the business who that's their role. It's just, keep the policies up to date, make sure things are compliant. So life has got a lot more complex in the workplace. Gig work and hybrid work were happening before, but if anything, they've probably become more insecure during the pandemic. And then this last one, which is an added stressor, which doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but with everyone working from home, not with everyone, with those who can working from home, there's the option for the employer to do a lot more passive employee data collection. And I'd like to think that most employers aren't, but the option's there and it happens. So again, something else that adds to stress. So let's see given all that, how do we gain more balance? So I like this research by Anna Cox and Dave Cook, who actually went into organisations and surveyed how the people who were coping best were coping, and deduced from that then what it was that meant that they were had better balance in their work. Excuse me, had a better equilibrium. Now, psychologists, as you probably noticed, love a 2x2 matrix, and I'm not going to go into this one in detail, except to point out that the ideal is obviously having high well-being and high boundary control. So the well-being is by the WHO definition, where you're in complete physical, mental and spiritual well-being, and it's not just the absence of disease. Sorry, I said spiritual, I meant social there. And then a high boundary control is when you feel in control of where your attention goes and what you're actually doing with your time. So this combination of an ability for self-care, to look after yourself, but also to set boundaries. And I was really impressed that came through when I was asked that initial question about what is balance, because often those who are keen to have balance are not always keen to impose the boundaries. So how will you do that? How can you do that? Well, after quite a bit of thinking and talking and research, these are what I would see as work-life balance skills. And these are the skills that are going to help us to have that equilibrium going forward. The first one of those is adaptability. And if you're here on this webinar today, you've obviously got through the last 18 months, 2 years. So I think you're pretty adaptable. But now it's probably a good time to think about, well, how do we maintain that? Because it can be quite exhausting, can't it? So how do we maintain that ability to be open and look at new ways to solve things? Which brings us to the second skill, creativity. So we've had a lot of new problems that we've faced, all of us, and to get through that, we've had to think differently. So you are creative, but how creative can you be? We've got no idea what's coming down the pipe. I think we've all learnt that in the last 2 years. So really recognising your own creativity and thinking about how you can have more of that. And then persistence. This is something that often gets forgotten, I think, when we're talking about resilience, because I've talked already about finding new ways of doing things, but we don't know how the new way of doing things will work unless we persist with it for a while. But at the same time, you need to be able to make those decisions about what is worth the effort for you and what is worth persisting with. So, given that we have talked about having equilibrium and we talked about skills, let's look at some of the resources that you have, that you already have. There's a lot you already know, and sometimes we need to be having different conversations with people. So that's asking for help when you need it, and be willing to help others when they ask for help, and being quite authentic about what you need in the particular time and space that you're at in order to have more balance. So staying connected and making new connections is another resource, as is being prepared to learn and also sharing what you learn. I think that is one way that we can all help each other at this time. I know a lot of people, including myself, are quite hungry for information because things are changing so rapidly. So we want to stay up to date with what may affect our industries and our work, and keep up with the trends. So to maintain this balance really comes back to you being willing to make some changes. So let's have a look at what are those. Let's have a look at what those might be. So this is a good time to review your priorities. So no matter where you are and what's happening for you at the moment, don't feel that you've set your priorities and they're set in stone, because as life around you changes and you change, those priorities are going to change. And look at them from the point of view as what matters to you, not what you feel you should do. I'd also like you to consider changing your perspective and whether you can accept imbalance. So rather than put too much pressure on yourself to go, oh yeah, I want to have work-life balance, I want to have lots of free time and all that, take a longer term view. And remember, I talked about the cycle rather than the line. And maybe sometimes we just have to accept that things are a bit out of whack for a while, but have confidence that it will get back into balance for us. Learning to say no or not now with a smile, hopefully, to allow you to do more of what you want to do. And one of the comments earlier was about being in balance. It's about having time to do things that I love. And it's worth reflecting on, well, if you don't have that time now, where's that time going? And is it maybe time to say no to other things? That probably sounds a bit glib if you're working from home and supervising children working at home and all the other demands, but occasionally it's okay to say no, we don't really need to do that today. Make your work your friend. If your job is structured so that you're doing a lot of stuff that you don't actually like doing, maybe talk to your boss or your peers about how that could be arranged. It may even turn out that there's somebody who would love to do the stuff that you hate and they will feel more in balance if they get to do more of that stuff, believe it or not. Number 5 is schedule time for fun, but it's important to make sure that you don't just make that another demand on your time so that you feel less balanced overall. Give up on perfect. Oh my goodness. That's a hard one for a lot of us, isn't it? So try and enjoy the process. And I would say that applies also to the process of trying to rearrange your life so that you feel more balanced. It's never going to be perfect. Striving for perfection can bring you all sorts of pain. So enjoy the process. Remember, progress, not perfection. And then finally, I think it helps if we shift the focus from what we've got to do to who we want to be. And you will have heard of mindfulness exercises, and there's an awful lot available. There's a lot of mindfulness apps. And all that comes down to, I mean, the aim of it all is to have you here now and ideally get you out of your head for a while. So there are some very quick, simple exercises that you can do, which I won't take you through now, but the importance of getting out of your head and into your body is where you feel the emotions. So the body is where you can get in touch with how you are, how your balance is really. I mean, that's figuratively, that's true, and literally as well. But if you can be in touch with your emotions, they'll tell you, you know, it's that bit of a feeling in the tummy, or you're tense. How many of us sit in front of the computer going like this? If you're aware of that, you can do something about it and get yourself back into balance. From a workplace perspective, those earlier, it's different researchers now. It wasn't the earlier researchers at all. So Lupus and Ruth Castro came up with this 5-step process, but this was again researched in workplaces. And this was about how do you get from being out of balance to getting back into feeling like there's more control. And so remember, coming back to that feeling of well-being, balance with setting boundaries. So the first step, and the most important step, is to stop. Just stop and think, well, is this how we want to be? So that's what it means by denormalize. You know, I said earlier how busy has become a status symbol. Everyone's busy. I've got so much to do, and my to-do list is a mile long, and I've got these quarterly goals and everything. If you can step back from that a minute and just go to yourself, well, what is important here? And just because everybody else is rushing around like headless chooks, is that actually normal, and do I need to do that? And then perhaps turn inward and listen to your emotions, and this is where you can get in touch with, you know, what's important to you. And after reflecting on that, it's a good time to reset your priorities. So when you start to get to step 3 and step 4, this is where it's useful to talk to a coach, to your mentor, to your boss, to your peers, to anyone else who is going to be around and available to help you change how things are working. I think that this whole process requires a good deal of courage, but also a lot of curiosity. So get curious and get courageous. And then when you get to the implementation step, obviously you're going to implement what you feel are the important priorities and move along. And then reflect and, you know, monitor and probably start again right from the beginning. So speaking of the beginning, I feel like I've talked a lot and I've rushed through. And it's always the difficulty with this sort of environment. So given all of what we've talked about, I'm curious to know what you think you would like to do to get started. So if you'd like to share with everyone in the chat, or feel free to switch off your microphone. Also, if you have any questions, any comments are welcome. Is anyone going to do anything?
Yep, I'm going to say hi. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Susan. Phil.
Hi, Phil. Thank you.
The reason I'm saying hi is I find it quite fascinating, the the mindset of Eastern religions, like I guess Hinduism and Buddhism, and comparing it to a sort of Judeo-Christian background that we have.
Yeah.
And I suppose in Australia, modern Australia, we need, to some extent, we look at good things from both and sort of put them together to see how we function as a human in this changed society, I suppose.
And in an ideal world, that's what we'd be doing, wouldn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of what's stopping us from taking those good things at the moment is just a base level of anxiety that we're all living with.
Yeah,
It's not always easy to take the time for reflection. But when I came across this concept, I just found it quite fascinating, because it means also that not only that, we say this too shall pass. So that's the good things and the bad things all pass, it's all part of a cycle. But when you come around to that same point or same sort of thing happening on that cycle, you've brought your learnings from when it happened before. Yes, and I think that's a really valuable thing to remember, instead of going, oh no, here we are again, to actually reflect on, well, what did I learn last time this happened, and how can I apply that?
On a sort of almost trivial note, it's interesting with Groundhog Day, the movie, how each time he came around to the new day, he was getting better at what he had to do. He thought was important to achieve. He's
exactly.
Yeah. So it's a useful parallel, I suppose.
I must watch that. I still haven't seen that movie.
Yeah, Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just accidentally gone back a slide or two. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? You'd think I know how to drive this.
It's a good revision lesson. I think all the things you've said so far are really important. It's great.
Yeah, I think what was really nice was to see how much of it's backed up by actual research. Yeah.
So with the ACTU, was that a large sample size?
I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. However, I'll show you the next slide and you can find out for yourself. So if you want to scan this QR code, and obviously it'll be in the slides that you get sent as well, that takes you to a page on our website called Balanced Resources, where I put links to all the research. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'll drop out so other people can drop in. So thank you, Susan.
Great.
I'm still there.
So
thank you
very much.
Philip on the chat has also
Keep up the good work. I'm still listening.
Has also shared from Philip Wilson. He said, some of the stress I face is my own doing with expectations I place on myself. So I need to change my mindset. And I think I know I can identify with that, and I'm sure a lot of others can as well.
That's the whole progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And I think now we're actually, someone was saying the other day, you used to say to someone, how are you? And people go, yeah, I'm great. But now I think we're being a bit more honest about that, because we've all been struggling at different times. And I think there's other parts of work and how we interact that we can spend time being a bit more honest about as well. And clarifying expectations is definitely one of those. With yourself as well as whoever's asking you to do the work. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one here from Claire. Claire said, yes, I think I just need the courage to say no, which is such a great point. Lockdown was great for me, taking time out from a very busy life of full-time work, a couple of boards on top of that, 2 significant volunteer roles, visiting aging relatives in nursing home, juggling the kids' activities. Coming out of lockdown is a stressor for me. It sounds like you're very, very busy, Claire. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And there's one more here from Christine as well. No is a complete sentence, and we have to be truthful about using it as such, which is a very good point as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much, because we always feel like we have to say no, but then we have to explain ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But really, no should be just as valid as saying yes.
Absolutely.
If someone questioned you, then have an answer ready, but it should be enough to just say no.
So I'll just speak up. It's Claire here.
Thanks, Claire.
On that comment that I wrote down. That's a real stress for me. My work colleagues are all planning to meet up and meet at the pub in Redfern next Friday if you're around, and do all that sort of thing. For me, that represents going back to a part of, I guess, a component of my life that actually just contributes to feeling run down and tired. So lockdown for me has been fabulous in terms of sleeping 8 hours a night as opposed to maybe 5 or 6. Actually going out and walking the dog in the morning with the kids, things that I never used to do. I mean, look, the negatives, of course, yes, I wasn't able to visit 3 relatives in nursing homes across Sydney, but actually that was really good. That might sound really.
Oh no, I have an elderly mother in a nursing home. I totally get it.
once I got used to it, it was actually refreshing. Because already this weekend with lockdown and even older relatives that are not in nursing homes who can now be accessed. I live in one of the areas that were considered more lockdown than others, and look, even just talking about it now, I feel the stress which I never felt before because I just managed it. I just lived that life, whereas now it's just. I just need the courage to say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to look at my sage grow in my new herb garden.
Oh, lovely.
It's just the simple stuff. So I know that I'm going to struggle with that. And some of my work colleagues will struggling with coming out of lockdown. Most of them, though, have hit the ground running already.
But it's a real thing, that stress about emerging. Lots of people are feeling that. Claire, it sounds like you should talk to Christine.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we did practice that this morning, and we decided as a family that we wouldn't do one thing that we normally do and take on, and that's and actually I still have to deliver the news that actually we're happy to coach, but we're not happy to organise it. So I haven't done that yet, but I will do that, and I'm inspired to do that even more so now, because I mean the whole I like the comment around resilience versus sustainability, and I guess I think I'm incredibly resilient, but I'm not sustainable.
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's something that we've missed in the whole conversation about resilience, as more and more demands are put onto people. I know that Christine's added to the chat, and I agree with you, Christine. And I was thinking when you were talking, Claire, that maybe it's a case of saying, well, I've got elderly relatives to visit, I've got children to look after. I'm not coming to the pub. I'm not comfortable with that yet.
Yeah. And look, I'm not saying poor me by any stretch. I actually feel incredibly privileged for being able to be in a job that I can work at home and to have all of this in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
But it really has made me realise that I need to do more for me, and the things that make. I mean, look, I have an 11-year-old who I'm sure. I know I'm not Robinson Crusoe here. I've discovered what it's like to be a sort of a stay-at-home mum or parent, but still working, but being here, being more present. Gosh, how lucky are we? To have had that insight.
Yeah, and I think this is the sort of thing that sits behind the great resignation that I was talking about earlier, is that people who have had time to reflect on all that are going, hey, but added on that the fact that who knows when you might get COVID or something else might happen to you. So why would you put up with less than what you've got now? Thanks, Claire.
Susan, I have a question. I hear from a lot of our members that they took on more with less over the pandemic in terms of their workload, and they're looking now to really, as you said, regain that work-life balance that they have lost a little bit over the last couple of years. Do you have any tips for how they can go about speaking to their leaders within their business about making those changes? Because I think for some people it's a bit of an intimidating conversation to have.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you know, we're looking at ways to educate managers about having those conversations, because in my work life, you never actually, managers avoided talking to you about your personal life, and, you know, work and your personal life was separate. But I think it all comes down to making that personal connection, but also, to be blunt, you probably have to do a bit of a sales job on it as well, and show the organisation what's in it for them. On the other side of things, you know, you said that people have been working harder or doing more with less. They're not commuting, so they're putting in more hours, and that's consistent across a lot of different industries. But I've also heard that now some employers are thinking, well, we let things ride a bit, and now we want pay and been for the last 18 months. And from the employer's perspective, they think we're coming back to normal, and these are our expectations. So if they don't think they're putting more work on people, I think it's just, you know, reverting to how things should be. So there's a lot of really tricky conversations to be had. And, you know, I know IML has a mentoring program. So that would be one suggestion, would be get yourself on a mentoring program and talk to a mentor and, you know, help get them to help you rehearse having that conversation too.
Great tips. Thanks, Susan.
Oh, good. Any more?
I think that's all. Did anybody else have any questions or any comments? Feel free to jump in. I will also take this opportunity. I've just popped on the website and just following what Susan said there. We do have a virtual workshop coming up on the 2nd of November called Deal with Conflict Confidently. So if that's
perfect.
if I can pitch that in, if anybody's having that struggle, there's a good
for the upsell. I was just thinking it's funny that I've gone through this presentation on balance in record time.
Well, we've all got a bit of extra time this afternoon now, so we can...
Well, exactly. You can get back more into balance. So I'm just going to put that slide up with the QR code on it again, if anyone missed that and wanted to scan that. It's funny, isn't it? We now have QR codes on our business cards, whereas, you know, 10 years ago, people were suggesting that, and I was like, who'd ever use it? And now we're QR coding everything. Yeah, so if you would like to be in touch, these are all our contact details, and, you know, all the socials. If you'd like to follow Balance at Work, I'd love to stay in touch. And any questions or comments, you know, please shoot me an email. I'm happy to hear from you anytime.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I think we covered questions.
We've covered, yep.
Is there any more?
No worries at all. Fantastic. Well, look, you know, thanks so much, Susan. I'll wrap up in just a second, but that was an absolutely fantastic presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did as well. Thank you so much for coming along and sharing that with us.
It was a pleasure.
Fantastic. And I know that Susan's details are on some of those slides there, and the slides are available to you after this presentation, as well as the recording. Before we head off this afternoon, I just want to share a little bit of information about some other MemX events that are coming up for our members. So on the 9th of November, we have a wonderful event with Shane Stone, the Honourable Shane Stone, and that's happening in Darwin, but it is a hybrid event. If that's something you'd be interested in, please pop on the website and you can register that online. And we also have a number of end of year celebrations happening around the country in the next couple of months. Obviously not in every area because of lockdowns, but where we can, we're putting those on. A lot of them are online, and we'll also be in touch as those go live. But that's all from us. Thank you again to Susan. It was a wonderful presentation. Thanks to all of you for coming along. We hope that you had a great time at this session. I'm sure you did. Have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.